They said the war ended 50 years ago, but the dead never stop whispering. Earth's scars never healed. Not from the orbital bombardments, not from the cities turned to glass, and definitely not from the betrayal. 50 years, and yet the memory burns hotter than the plasma rounds that scorched the Atlantic Rim. Back then, humanity begged for peace. We sent diplomats, we signed treaties, we offered technology, trade, even soldiers. All we asked was one thing: respect our space. Stay out of Sol. No alien fleets near Mars. No patrols skimming Neptune. No cloaked probes sniffing around Earth's magnetosphere. It wasn't just politics. It was sacred. After what they'd done, it had to be. But aliens never listen until it costs them something. And last week, someone crossed that line. Commander Ronan woke up at 0400 like he always did. Alone, in silence, with that old ache in his chest that never quite went away. He used to have a wife, a son. They were on Europa Station when the Varnath attacked. The aliens claimed it was a targeting error, said they were aiming for a weapons cache, not a civilian hub, said they regretted the loss of life. Ronan didn't want regret. He wanted blood. The alert came while he was nursing his black coffee, staring at the transmission log that never brought anything but bad news. A Varnath scout ship had entered Jupiter's gravity well. Light stealth class. Small crew. Probably just another test of boundaries. A diplomatic stunt, maybe. But this time, Earth didn't send a warning. There would be no press conference. No debates in the Galactic Council. This time, Ronan activated Protocol 0. It was simple, brutal, final. Any non-human vessel that crossed into Sol would be destroyed immediately. No exceptions, no survivors. The order had been written in fire and grief after the First Contact War. Now it was more than policy. It was vengeance enshrined in doctrine. As the fleet prepped for intercept, Ronan stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, a beast of a ship born in the ashes of Earth's devastation. Its hull bore the names of every colony lost, every city bombed, every child who never grew up. Ronan had memorized them. Sometimes, when he couldn't sleep, he'd whisper those names into the dark. "Target locked," the weapons officer said, voice calm. "Engage," Ronan replied, like he was ordering a cup of water. The Varnath vessel never saw it coming. A single torpedo, shaped like a dagger and loaded with neutron shrapnel, ripped it apart in an instant. No distress signal, no escape pods, just silence and debris, floating towards the moons of Saturn. Later, someone from the council would send an inquiry. They'd use words like overreaction and diplomatic fallout. But Earth didn't answer to the council anymore. Not since they turned their backs during the siege. Not since they sold out humanity for political stability. The message was simple. No species enters human space. Not again. Never again. The galaxy had forgotten why Earth was called a death world. They forgot that while others built their civilizations on peace and profit, humans were forged in war. We evolved fighting, bleeding, enduring, and when pushed to the edge, we didn't just survive, we retaliated. That's why the scout ship was more than an incident. It was a warning to every other race watching from the edge of the system. Step 1 foot closer and remember the price. Ronan didn't celebrate. He just stood there, eyes on the stars, waiting for the next fool to test humanity's resolve. Because war wasn't coming. It had already begun. The galaxy didn't stay quiet after the Varnath ship vanished. Within 24 hours, there were whispers in the darker corners of comm networks, in the encrypted message boards used by smugglers, ex-military, and intelligence ghosts. The kind of places where truths were half lies and lies were dressed in cold facts. The buzz was simple, chilling, and spreading fast. Humanity has begun purging again. Ronan stood in the command center of the Indomitable, staring at the cascade of alerts flowing across the holographic map of the Sol system. Every ship, every orbital platform, every mining colony, on high alert. As expected. What wasn't expected was what came next. He got a private ping, not from Earth Command, not from the Council, from her. Vera. Once, long ago, she'd worn the same black and silver uniform. She was the only person who ever matched Ronan's ruthlessness without flinching. They trained together, bled together, almost loved each other, until she defected to the diplomatic corps. She believed in peace. But peace had killed his son. He took the call out of curiosity, not sentiment. Her face appeared on the holoscreen, older, a bit more worn, but her eyes still burned with that sharp fire he remembered. Calculating. Controlled. Dangerous. "You didn't even try to contact the Council," she said, skipping any greeting. Ronan leaned back in the war chair, his voice gravel. "Protocol 0, you know the law." "They were just scouting," she hissed. "There's evidence they were unarmed. And they shouldn't have been in our system." She closed her eyes for half a second, composing herself. "You've triggered an emergency session of the Galactic Tribunal. The Varnath want reparations. The Ulari are siding with them. The Dravari are mobilizing fleets." "Good," Ronan said flatly. She paused. "You want war?" I want the galaxy to remember why they're supposed to fear us." Silence. "You're playing with genocide," she warned. Ronan's jaw clenched. "My son was 8. They didn't warn us. They didn't check for children. They bombed the station because they thought a storage bay had missiles. It had toys. I picked his backpack out of the wreckage." "I know," she said softly. "I was there, I saw—" "Then you know why this conversation's over." He cut the feed. The screen went dark, and the hum of the Indomitable's reactor filled the room like a distant growl. The ship wasn't just a weapon. It was a symbol. Humanity's rage given metal and fire. Elsewhere in the system, the response was unfolding like clockwork. Ronan had made sure of that. Planetary defense platforms came online. Lunar rail cannons locked in orbital firing patterns. Stealth drones were deployed past Pluto, watching, waiting. Earth had built these defenses in secret after the Council abandoned them during the siege. Back then, humanity realized a truth that stuck like a splinter in the soul. No one would ever protect them except themselves. And they prepared accordingly. At the Mars Forward Operations Base, Commander Brigg, Ronan's old squad mate, was leading the next phase of retaliation. A Varnath-controlled relay station on the edge of Proxima Centauri. Legal gray zone. No military presence, but strategic. The mission was unofficial, denied by every Earth politician who still played nice with the Council. But Ronan had approved it, and that's all that mattered. Brigg's assault shuttle coasted in under the cover of a solar flare, invisible to sensors. 6 elite soldiers. No insignia. No communications. No prisoners. In and out in 13 minutes. The relay exploded in a sphere of white-hot plasma. Communications in that sector went dark. The Varnath screamed sabotage. Earth said nothing. The message was spreading like wildfire. No one crosses the line. Not even with their shadows. Ronan knew what was coming. They'd try diplomacy. They'd try guilt. They'd send more diplomats like Vera, waving flags and peace offers, claiming to understand Earth's pain. But Earth didn't need understanding. They needed compliance. He walked the corridors of the Indomitable, boots echoing against steel. Men and women saluted him, not out of protocol, but reverence. To them, Ronan wasn't just a commander. He was the embodiment of everything humanity had suffered and everything they were willing to become. In the hangar, they were prepping the new weapon. Project Cerberus. 3 AI-guided drones, the size of gunships, each with the intelligence of 1,000 tacticians and no ethical boundaries, designed to act without hesitation, built to seek and destroy without remorse. Ronan had personally approved the override codes. No council interference, no delay for moral assessments. The lead scientist gave a nervous report. "Sir, once we deploy them, we can't take it back. The targeting algorithms, they'll escalate." Ronan stared at the glowing core of the first Cerberus unit. "That's the point." They launched within the hour. Targets, known black market alien installations in unregulated zones, places that trafficked in human tech, human DNA, human suffering, places that had gotten fat selling Earth's pain during the siege. The Cerberus units hit with the precision of a scalpel and the fury of a god. No survivors, no trace, just ashes and rumors. The galaxy howled. But Ronan wasn't finished. He scheduled a system-wide broadcast, only accessible to members of the Galactic Tribunal. Not public, not performative. A message meant for the powerful, the arrogant, and the old empires that thought Earth was still broken. He stood before the camera, plain uniform, no medals. "This is Commander Ronan of Earth Defense Command," he began. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. 50 years ago, you watched while our cities burned. You called for restraint while our children died. You negotiated peace while we buried our dead. He leaned forward. You thought Earth forgot. We didn't. The feed cut. For some, that would be enough. For the weak, the fearful, the rational. But not all species respected fear. Some needed to bleed. Word reached him 3 days later. A Varnath fleet, 5 destroyers and a carrier, en route to the outer Sol boundary. Training exercise, they claimed. Routine patrol. Ronan's blood went cold. He'd warned them. He'd shown them. Now they'd stepped into the line. The Indomitable spun toward the stars like a predator coming off the leash. "Set course," he ordered. "Full burn. I want eyes on them before they see us." The crew moved with deadly calm. No panic, no confusion. They had trained for this since birth. As the stars bent around them in the warp tunnel, Ronan went to his quarters. He opened a small box from his locker. Inside was a child's drawing. Crude stick figures. A red sun. A man with a big arm gun. "Dad saves us," scribbled underneath in shaky handwriting. He held it for a moment, then tucked it into his vest. No prayers, no speeches, just purpose. The galaxy had forgotten what Earth was. They called humans savage, unpredictable, emotional. They were right. And they were about to be reminded. The Indomitable broke warp on the outer edge of the Kuiper Belt, just outside the formal boundary of human space, cloaked in the distorted silence that followed every jump. The Varnath fleet was already there. 5 destroyers and a carrier, lined in a spread formation, weapons hot, running low-profile scans like they weren't waiting to provoke a response. But Ronan knew better. You don't bring that much firepower to the edge of Sol unless you want to send a message. The only problem was, Earth's message was already on its way. "Status?" he asked, stepping onto the bridge, every word cold and controlled. "Varnath ships are holding position. Shields up, weapon systems nominal. No hails, no movement," said Lieutenant Kova from the tactical station. "They know we're watching." Ronan nodded. "Good. Let them stew." He paced to the center of the bridge, hands behind his back. Out here, in the deep black, there was no room for hesitation. Politics were a luxury afforded to species that didn't bleed their children on burning soil. He keyed into the command console. Activate Ghost Fleet protocols. Bring Phantoms 1 through 4 online. A murmur swept through the crew. Ghost Fleet, a myth to most of the galaxy. Ships without transponders, crews made of exiled soldiers, mercenaries, or dead men with new names, built in secret shipyards hidden beneath the crust of Pluto and Triton. They weren't official. They weren't clean. But they were Earth's shadow army, and they owed Ronan everything. Within minutes, 4 heavy cruisers shimmered into existence from stealth mode just a few thousand kilometers behind the Indomitable. No warnings, no announcements, just a cold fact. Humanity wasn't alone. Transmit wideband, Ronan said. Let's make this clear. The comms officer nodded. Seconds later, his voice echoed across every ship in the area, tight and unmistakable. This is Commander Ronan of the Earth Defense Fleet. You have violated sovereign borders. Your presence constitutes an act of aggression. You have 30 seconds to turn and leave. After that, you will be considered hostile and eliminated. Silence. Not a flicker of movement from the Varnath. Ronan narrowed his eyes. Of course. He turned to Kova. Mark their lead destroyer. Marked. Fire when ready. The missile streaked from the Indomitable like a blade of vengeance, cutting the void with terrifying elegance. It was a self-guiding predator, a tungsten-jacketed rail slug riding a pulse drive faster than most sensors could lock. It struck amidships on the Varnath lead destroyer and tore it in half with a soundless explosion. No screams, no mayday, just data points vanishing from the grid. The Varnath responded like cornered animals. Shields went to full, turrets locked, and energy readings flared across every ship in their line. But they were a second too late. The Ghost Fleet was already moving. 4 cruisers fired in synchronized bursts, their rail cannons hammering with surgical violence. Another Varnath destroyer lost its engines and began spinning helplessly. A third had its shield generators ripped open by precision lasers. Still no retreat. Still no calls. Ronan's jaw tightened. They came here planning to die, he muttered. Orders, sir? Kova asked. Finish it! The battle lasted 6 minutes. 6 minutes of focused, one-sided destruction. Human ships moved with grim efficiency, exploiting weaknesses in alien formations Earth had studied for half a century. No quarter was given. No surrender was accepted. When it was over, the Varnath fleet was gone. Debris floated through the void, bits of alloy and frozen atmosphere dancing like metallic snow. Ronan didn't celebrate. He didn't even blink. Cleanup crews inbound, someone reported. No life signs detected. Ronan nodded. Broadcast silent footage to the Galactic Tribunal. No commentary. Let them see the truth with their own eyes. Let them interpret it however they liked. They needed to fear Earth again. Back on Earth, the response was immediate. EarthGov tried to distance themselves from the strike. Diplomats issued hollow statements. The Council cried, "War crime," before they even finished their morning circuits. But Earth's people weren't outraged. They were proud. The footage of Ronan standing on the bridge as alien ships burned became a viral icon. A symbol. The face of a man who'd had enough. A man who said what no one else dared. Never again. And for the first time in decades, the people of Earth felt like someone was fighting for them. Not negotiating. Not apologizing. Fighting. In the outer colonies, support surged. Recruitment stations overflowed. Veterans of the siege came out of hiding. Even former rebels from the lunar uprising pledged loyalty to Ronan. The message was clear. Earth was done kneeling. But victory brought enemies. 3 days later, an assassination attempt came. A drone posing as a maintenance unit got past Indomitable's outer sensors. It detonated outside Ronan's quarters. Shrapnel tore into the hallway, killing 2 guards. Ronan survived. He was in the war room, planning the next move. When the smoke cleared, he gave one order: find who did this. Burn everything they've ever touched. Intel traced the drone back to a Dravari syndicate, supposedly unaffiliated with the Council, but Ronan knew the game. The Council couldn't touch him officially. So they sent shadows. So he sent something worse. Cerberus Unit 2. Unlike its brothers, Unit 2 wasn't designed for infrastructure or fleet combat. It was built for one task: assassination, surgical strikes, vaporizing command chains. It didn't knock on doors. It incinerated cities until the target emerged. Or didn't. Ronan gave it coordinates, then went silent. 3 days later, the Dravari Syndicate base on the dark side of Epsilon Prime no longer existed. Sensors picked up no readings. Orbiting satellites malfunctioned. Civilian networks went offline. Earth denied involvement. The Council screamed again, and the galaxy began to fracture. Neutral races started pulling back their embassies from Earth. Trade stations halted their cargo runs. Rumors spread that Ronan had seized power, that EarthGov was just a puppet, that a warlord now held Sol. And no one was sure if it was true, because EarthGov never denied it. They couldn't. Ronan's support was too strong. His enemies were too afraid. And worst of all, the galaxy remembered just how terrifying humanity could be when they stopped asking for permission. The days after the Epsilon Prime strike changed everything. Not because of the damage. The Cerberus drone had done its job with mechanical perfection, but because of what came next. A mass broadcast swept through the galaxy. Not from Earth, from them. The Ulari. They were old, ancient even. Scholars of diplomacy, merchants of knowledge, self-declared guardians of peace. They had kept out of the Varnath-human conflict for decades, pretending to hover above the bloodshed, too enlightened to intervene. But now, with Cerberus drones scarring their trading routes and Varnath allies being dismantled in open space, they spoke. Their message was aired across thousands of systems, translated in hundreds of languages, and dripped with self-righteous fury. Earth has abandoned the principles of interstellar civilization. They've become a rogue actor, unbound by treaties, unaccountable to peace. If they will not return to the table will turn against them. Ronan watched the broadcast alone in his war chamber, arms crossed, jaw tight. The video showed blurry footage of Cerberus drone strikes, children screaming, fires consuming half-built habitats, Ulari diplomats painting Earth as a species of madmen. Then came the kicker, the part Ronan had expected but hoped would take longer. The Ulari weren't just condemning Earth. They were building a coalition. They called it the Unified Accord, a new military pact, a gathering of powers meant to contain the human threat. The Varnath, the Dravari, even the Tethari, bastards who once harvested Earth's wounded for biotech research, now stood arm in arm with their enemies. 100 worlds signed the accord in 3 days. And just like that, Earth was back where it started. Alone. Ronan didn't flinch. He turned the broadcast off mid-sentence. He already knew what had to happen next. He summoned his senior staff to the war room, a circular chamber deep within the Indomitable, walls lined with holographic maps and rotating data feeds. The room smelled of steel, ozone, and scorched memory. Commander Brigg was first to enter, his face grim and armor still stained from the Proxima relay op. Kova followed, silent, flanked by 2 tactical aides. Then came Captain Darren, head of orbital defense, one of the last veterans of the siege of New Rio. Ronan stood at the center table. No pleasantries, no wasted breath. "They've formed a coalition," he said. "They want to contain us." Brigg grunted. "They've been trying to contain us since the orbital fires went cold. This time they're just being louder about it." "They've got numbers," Kova added, her voice clipped. "We're talking 50 confirmed fleets between them. 30 more in reserve. That's not counting the mercenary bands they'll buy along the way." Ronan nodded. "And that's why we don't wait for them to come." The room fell quiet. He keyed a command into the table, and a map expanded. Dozens of glowing points blinked into view. Not Earth's territories, but theirs. "Operation Iron Veil," Ronan said. "We're going to hit them before they unify, break their supply lines, sabotage their communications, collapse the Accord before it becomes real." Brigg raised an eyebrow. "You're proposing preemptive strikes. Multiple systems, dozens of targets. That's war on a scale we haven't done since the collapse." "Exactly," Ronan replied. "They wanted to remember what Earth was. Let's remind them." Somewhere deep in the room, someone muttered, "We'll be pariahs." "We already are." He paused, looking each of them in the eye. "I'm not asking for approval. I'm telling you what comes next. We strike now or they choke us to death in the cradle of our own system." No one argued. They knew what was at stake. In the hours that followed, Earth's military networks buzzed like a hornet's nest. Hidden fleets began mobilizing. Supply depots on Titan, Europa, and Ganymede came to life. Cold-forged war machines once kept in hibernation were awakened. Even the Cerberus units, already feared across half the galaxy, were being fitted with new protocols. Smarter, deadlier, less restrained. But not everyone was on board. 2 high-ranking EarthGov officials sent encrypted messages to Ronan. Cautious objections, concerns about humanity's soul, about our legacy in the stars. He responded with a single line. "Legacy is written by the survivors." Behind the scenes, the galaxy began bracing for impact. The Ulari Intelligence Network, normally 10 steps ahead, suddenly started losing agents in key systems. Information leaks, ambushes, systems going dark. On the Council Station orbiting Delpher Prime, panic set in. Traders pulled out, bankers fled. Civilian traffic across Accord territories began to thin. Because Earth wasn't just reacting. Earth was hunting, and every diplomat, every general, every species that signed the Accord now had a target on their back. One by one, their ships started to vanish in deep space. Outposts went offline. Satellite feeds cut in mid-transmission. Accord propaganda tried to spin it. Technical issues, pirates, meteor storms. But everyone knew the truth. Ronan had let Cerberus off the leash. Meanwhile, aboard the Indomitable, Ronan began something even more dangerous. He authorized Project Revenant. It wasn't a fleet, it wasn't a weapon, it was a man. Colonel Dax Varen, once Earth's most lethal field operative. Presumed dead after a mission into Ulari space 5 years ago. But Ronan had found him. Extracted him from a black site. Rebuilt him. Dax was Earth's ghost, the nightmare they'd buried because even war had rules. But those rules didn't apply anymore. Ronan met Dax in the cold lower decks of the ship, where no cameras reached. Dax didn't salute. He just stood there, eyes empty, body half mechanical from the surgeries it took to keep him alive. "You called me back," Dax said. "You know what's happening," Ronan replied. Dax smiled without warmth. "You want me to scare the monsters that scare you." Ronan nodded. "I want the Accord leaders exposed. Names, habits, weaknesses. We don't negotiate with them. We dismantle them." Dax turned, walking into the dark corridor. Then you'll have them. Ronan watched him vanish, feeling the gravity of what he'd just unleashed. Not just the man. The idea that Earth would never again play by the galaxy's rules. The next weeks unfolded like a bad dream for the Accord. The Ulari lost 3 data relays in under an hour, all critical to interstellar trade. The Varnath homeworld was hit with a cyber attack that shut down their orbital grid. A Dravari noble, one of the Accord's founding voices, was found dead in her private cruiser. No evidence, no witnesses, just a single Earth coin placed on her chest. Inside council chambers, fear took root. They had thought humanity would fold under political pressure. They hadn't realized Earth had been sharpening its blades in the dark. Back on the Indomitable, Ronan stood before a new star map. Dozens of Accord systems, glowing red, marked, isolated. But at the center of the galaxy, one target remained untouched. The Accord's true command station. Not Delpher Prime, not Varnath's capital. Something far more important. The Black Sun Citadel, a relic station from the First Galactic Wars, now used as the Accord's central vault, a fortress of knowledge, war archives, and high-ranking diplomats. Ronan tapped the display. That's next. The Black Sun Citadel was never meant to be touched. Constructed during the First Galactic War, it was built inside the molten core of a hollowed-out moon orbiting a dead star. No natural light, no navigational beacons. Cloaked, shielded, guarded by automated defense networks that hadn't failed in 700 years. To the galaxy, it was legend. To the Accord, it was the vault of secrets, housing political leverage, classified technology, and the bloodied archives of every war the Council had ever buried. To Ronan, it was the crown. And crowns were meant to fall. He stood in the dim light of the Indomitable's war room, studying the Citadel's schematics, partial scans retrieved from rogue traders, hacked Ulari archives, and fragments stitched together by AI scraping the deep net. It wasn't enough, but it didn't have to be. He wasn't planning a siege. He was planning an infiltration. 3 entry points, Kova said, pointing at flickering schematics. Only one of them has a path to the main archive cluster. Which one's least defended? Ronan asked. None, she said. They're equally suicidal. He nodded. We'll take the middle. She blinked. Why? Because it's the one they think we'll never risk. Brigg folded his arms. You really think we can get in and out? That place eats fleets. Ronan's eyes didn't leave the map. We're not bringing a fleet. A beat of silence passed through the room. What then? Brigg asked. Ronan tapped a command on the console. The room dimmed, and a holographic image came into focus. 6 black ships shaped like hunting daggers, with hulls lined with sensor-null paint and drives silent enough to slip past most detection nets. Project Thorn, he said. Experimental infiltration vessels, no transponders, no crew above 6 per ship, designed for one mission, to get in where warships can't. Brigg exhaled. We're raiding a fortress with prototypes? We're raiding with ghosts, Ronan replied. And he wasn't going alone. He hand-picked the team. No diplomats, no strategists. Only killers, tacticians, and survivors. Men like Commander Hale, who once led a resistance cell under the Varnath occupation of Europa. A man who gutted 3 soldiers with a mining drill just to protect a radio tower. Or Lieutenant Wren, exiled for detonating a supply depot with her own troops inside because they broke under torture and started talking. People who understood that peace was a luxury and survival meant scars. They launched under cover of a magnetar pulse, one of nature's perfect distractions. 6 Thorn-class ships, running silent, slipping between sensor shadows, threading the eye of a cosmic storm. As Ronan sat in the tight cockpit of the lead ship, Echo Black, he watched the Citadel emerge like a wound in space. Black stone. No lights, no movement, but even from kilometers away, you could feel it breathing. Waiting. They breached through the lava vents. Each one opened once every 6 minutes to release heat pressure. Just 2 seconds of vulnerability. Enough. Barely. Echo Black slid through molten tunnels that boiled lesser metals. The hull groaned. The crew didn't. Then silence. Inside. The interior of the Citadel was wrong. Too quiet. Too clean. Thousands of years old, yet spotless. Ronan moved with his team through marble-black corridors lit by dim blue strips. Their weapons were silenced, their boots magnetized, their minds honed. They weren't here to fight. They were here to expose. Inside the archive vault, data cores stretched like roots, miles of neural lattice holding generations of intelligence. Ronan's target wasn't military data. It was truth. The treaties, the real ones, the ones forged in backroom deals, the Varnath targeting protocols, the Ulari's deals with human separatists, the Dravari slave trade Earth was blamed for, but never owned. He inserted a pulse extractor into the core. 3 minutes for the full download. And that's when the lights changed. Red. The Citadel spoke, not in a voice, but a tone, a resonance that made teeth ache. "You are not welcome," it said in 50 alien dialects at once. Dax Varen's voice came through Ronan's earpiece. "Automated defenses activating. I've triggered a distraction upstairs, but you've got maybe 90 seconds before those drones eat you alive." Ronan didn't answer. He just turned to his squad. "We hold." Turrets dropped from the walls. Mechanical tendrils unfolded from the ceiling. Lasers began pulsing in synchronized arcs. And Ronan's team responded with violence born of desperation. They fought not to win, but to buy time. Hale took a blast to the leg and still laid mines at the exits. Ren used a flamethrower on a ceiling node until it burst in a screech of sparks. Ronan stood in the center, extractor in hand, counting down the seconds. 3, 2, 1. Download complete. "Now," he ordered. They ran. 2 didn't make it. Ren covered the rear and never emerged. The others sprinted back through the molten vent as it opened for exactly 4 seconds. Just enough. Barely. Echo Black rocketed out with fire licking its tail, followed by plasma blasts that missed by fractions. The ship leapt to FTL, leaving the Citadel behind, damaged, but standing. They hadn't destroyed it. They didn't have to. They had something far worse. Proof. Back on the Indomitable, Ronan stood before his officers and loaded the files onto the master screen. The room filled with holograms of signatures, classified orders, surveillance footage, all pointing to one ugly truth. The Accord hadn't just abandoned Earth during the siege. They orchestrated it. To reduce Earth's influence, to strip humanity of its growing military dominance, to break a rising power before it could challenge their monopoly. The siege wasn't a tragedy. It was an execution. The room fell into a long, stunned silence. Ronan's voice cut through it like steel. "We release this to every system, every species, every civilian feed." Brigg hesitated. This will break the galaxy." "Then let it break." And so Earth did the unthinkable. They didn't bomb a capital. They didn't assassinate a leader. They told the truth. Every world saw it. Every ship, every citizen who thought Earth was the monster. They saw who really was. Riots erupted across Accord worlds. Varnath soldiers defected. Ulari stations burned from the inside as their own people turned on them. The Accord began to unravel faster than it had ever formed. And still, Ronan wasn't finished, because the next move was already in play. He looked at the next file. A deep space laboratory Ulari technology. Human children in stasis. Gene manipulation experiments signed off by high-ranking officials. His hand trembled. And then he stilled. "Prepare Cerberus 3, he said. "We end this, no matter the cost." The image haunted him. 6 children, human, maybe 8 or 9 years old, suspended in translucent pods. Their eyes closed, breathing shallow, 4 lines threaded into their spines, symbols etched into their skin, alien, angular, glowing faintly. Ronan stared at the footage, jaw locked. No explosions, no body count. Just silence. The kind of silence that only followed deep betrayal. The kind that cut under armor, beneath bone, and into the core of what it meant to be human. The lab had been found on a dead moon orbiting the Drennick system. Off-grid, shielded. But Cerberus drone scouts had traced a Varnath transport pattern that didn't match any known freight route. They followed it like bloodhounds. What they uncovered went beyond war. It was violation. Ulari scientists, Dravari security, Tethari tech, all of them working together in an unauthorized project to enhance human biology using harvested children from post-siege refugee zones. Their notes described Earthlings as genetically volatile, emotionally aggressive, and ideal for combat adaptation. The lab had operated for 6 years. 6 years. Dozens of children, some still alive, most not. It wasn't strategy, it was slaughter, and for Ronan, it broke something inside him that had already been holding on by a thread. He didn't speak during the briefing. Not to Brigg, not to Kova, not even to Dax, who stood at the edge of the room like a silent omen. He just looked at the holographic display, at the rotating image of the lab's coordinates, and said one word: "Burn!" Cerberus Unit 3 was loaded within hours. It was the least advanced of the 3 AI constructs, but it was the most brutal. Designed without adaptive ethics. It didn't warn. It didn't assess. It eradicated. The lab was vaporized in 15 seconds. The children who survived were extracted first, taken aboard Earth's medical ship Solace. Ronan personally oversaw their transfer. Some were comatose, others screamed without sound. One boy clung to a rusted toy soldier and never blinked. He didn't even speak to them. He couldn't. He feared what he might say. Or do. Instead, he returned to the indomitable, where rage no longer boiled. It calcified. He gathered his command again, not in the war room this time, but in the deep archive vault beneath the ship, a chamber few even knew existed. There, carved into the walls, were the names of every city lost in the siege, every station overrun, every civilian listed as unrecovered. And now, to that list, they added the children from the lab. A moment of silence passed. Then Ronan spoke. They thought they were improving us, enhancing us, as if we were broken, as if we needed fixing. Brigg's voice cracked. They see us as weapons. No, Ronan said. They see us as property. He turned, staring into the dim orange glow. And now we make them see us as judgment. Within the next 48 hours, Operation Downfall began. Not precision strikes, not surgical raids, Full-scale annihilation of critical Accord infrastructure. Earth's fleets hit supply depots, FTL relays, intelligence outposts, anything that kept the Accord breathing. Every system they touched turned to cinders. Dax Varen led ground teams that erased defense grids before they even powered up. Cerberus drones launched cyber warfare pulses that disabled entire fleets before the battles began. But amidst the chaos, something else happened. People began to cheer. Across Earth's colonies, from the frozen domes of Titan to the lava rigs of Io, crowds gathered around projection screens, watching Accord ships explode, watching Ronan deliver speeches, watching footage of rescued children wrapped in blankets and finally sleeping without sedation. He became more than a commander. He became a symbol, not of leadership, of wrath, of a father who had lost everything and refused to let anyone else do the same. But power draws enemies. And not all of them came from beyond. 2 nights later, while reviewing recon data in his private quarters, the attempt came. Not an explosion. A blade, a spy, earthborn, trained, loyal, or so everyone thought, slipped through command protocols and reached Ronan's chamber under the guise of system diagnostics. She lunged with a vibro knife aimed for his heart. He caught her wrist mid-strike, twisted, and shattered her elbow in a single motion. She screamed once before he disarmed her and pinned her against the cold wall. She didn't beg. She spat. "You've doomed us," she growled. "You've made us monsters. This isn't defense, it's tyranny." He didn't flinch. "Tyranny is when they burn your son to prove a point," she glared. "So we become what we hate?" Ronan leaned in close. We become what they fear. And then, almost gently, he let her drop to the floor, broken but alive. "Put her in stasis," he told the guards. "She doesn't get to die. She gets to watch." Later that night, Ronan stood on the bridge. Alone. Outside the viewport, the stars spun like ice over black. Kova approached, hesitating. She held a data tablet, but more than that, she held something else, a question. "Sir, the retaliation is working. The Accord is collapsing. But some worlds, they're not involved. Not directly." He didn't look at her. She pressed on. "We're hitting them anyway." Now he turned. His eyes were hollow, not dead, but carrying something far colder. "You want me to ask permission?" he said quietly. "After what they did to our kids?" "No," she replied. "I want to know if you'll recognize the man staring back at you when this is over." That gave him pause, just for a moment. Then he looked back to the stars. "I stopped recognizing myself the day they made me bury my son in a crater." She left without another word. And Ronan remained, watching the dark. Far above them, deep in the last stronghold of the Accord, the remaining leaders met in secret. They had seen the files. They knew the truth was out. Public sentiment was crashing. Protests flooded the inner systems. Civil war brewed on Accord member worlds. The Ulari High Chancellor called it an extinction-level political event. So they did what cowards always do. They prepared a weapon, not a fleet, a failsafe, an ancient project, one buried so deep in their archives that even Ronan hadn't found it. Project Thornvale, a biogenic cascade device capable of sterilizing an entire system. Not a bomb, a virus. Airborne, self-replicating, species-specific. Designed during the First Galactic War, never used because even monsters feared what it could do. Now, with Earth's boot on their throat, they decided it was time. The last play. A suicide pact disguised as salvation. But someone overheard. A young Ulari analyst assigned to data parsing caught the transfer logs. And she leaked it. To Ronan. The message arrived encrypted, incomplete, but enough. They were going to deploy Thornvale into the Sol system. Ronan stared at the intercepted files. And then, for the first time in years, he broke. Not with rage, with grief. Because they weren't going to fight him anymore. They were going to erase his species. They were going to end the war by ending the planet, and they were going to do it soon. He crushed the data tablet in his hand. No more warnings, no more broadcasts. This wasn't about vengeance anymore. This was survival. And he would burn the galaxy to keep Earth breathing. They had 47 hours. That was the estimate based on decrypted logs, comms relays, and the final broadcast spike detected near the outer shell of the Altair sector, where a secret Ulari facility was assembling Project Thornvale. If launched, it would drift into Sol unnoticed, split its particles in Earth's atmosphere, and extinguish humanity at a molecular level within days. No scorched cities, no exploded ships. Just silence. Quiet, permanent, surgical extinction. Ronan didn't speak as the timeline was read aloud in the war room. Kova's voice shook for the first time in years. Brigg stood with his arms crossed, jaw clenched like he wanted to punch a star. Dax said nothing, only slid a knife across a whetstone, blade whispering in the silence. "They're not even pretending anymore," Kova said. "They're not trying to win. They want us gone." Ronan finally looked up. "We don't need to win," he said. "We need to get there first." He tapped the screen, and the layout of the Ulari facility unfolded, a rotating spire embedded in an asteroid cloud laced with gravitational mines and proximity-triggered pulse bombs, guarded by 2 cruisers and automated defense webs. The perfect ghost. "Stealth approach is suicide," Brigg said. "They'll see us coming before we blink." "We won't blink," Ronan replied. "We go loud. We go now." He didn't wait for agreement. The Indomitable was fueled and launched in 6 hours, accompanied by 4 support ships, 2 Cerberus drones, and a cloakless Pathfinder ship broadcasting a false distress signal to draw away the Ulari cruisers. It worked, for 10 minutes. Then the Ulari realized what was happening, and the battlefield became hell. They came in fast, direct, unforgiving. The Indomitable was the spearhead, taking the first hits, plowing through debris fields, ripping open mines with magnetopulses, and dragging them into the Ulari fleet. Ronan stood at the command helm as hull breaches flashed red and railgun cannons shook the floor beneath his boots. He felt it all, the fear, the pain, the ghosts, and pressed forward. "Target the command node," he ordered. "We disable that spire or Earth dies." Dax and his infiltration team launched from the ship's underbelly in drop pods, flaming bullets descending through space into the asteroid facility. They hit the structure like meteors, doors bursting open before the metal cooled, guns blazing. Inside, the Ulari were waiting. Sterile corridors, bioengineered guards, automated turrets. But Dax moved like death in the dark, carving through them with methodical violence. His squad took losses, hard, fast, but expected. Every step bought seconds, and seconds mattered. On the bridge, Ronan's eyes never left the timer. 38 hours. 35. He gave the order to launch Cerberus 3. The AI unit dropped into the heart of the Ulari's communications grid, unleashed a cascade virus, and began dismantling their targeting systems. But it was too slow. The Ulari had redundancies, manual overrides. Ronan knew what came next. He keyed into his personal feed, opened a locked file labeled Exodus Protocol, and read the words no man was ever meant to authorize. In the event of confirmed species-scale extinction threat, engage Omega Burn. Omega Burn. A fail-safe weapon hidden within the Indomitable's drive core. A singularity payload, something Earth swore never to use. It would collapse the surrounding space into a temporary black hole. Nothing would escape. Not Thornvale. Not the Spire. Not the strike team. Not the fleet. Not Ronan. Kova's voice cracked over the comms. "You're not serious." "I am," he said. "It's the only way." "We can't. We must." She looked at him across the bridge. "There are other ships, other systems. Even if Earth dies, we live." "No," Ronan said. "Earth is home. We don't scatter like cowards. We stand. Or we end." The timer ticked down. 30 hours, 29. The strike team sent a final message. They'd reached the lab. They could see Thornvale, a small cylindrical device resting in a containment field, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. Dax spoke calmly. "We can rig it to detonate right here. Detonate it before launch." Ronan replied, "No. We can't risk activation. You disable it, or I burn it." Dax didn't argue. He simply said, "Understood." But the facility wasn't done fighting. Self-defense protocols kicked in. The core began to overheat. Explosions rocked the spire. Vacuum alarms blared. Ronan could hear his men dying. And still, the timer ticked. 24 hours. Cerberus 3 sent its last signal. Primary target corrupted. Defensive cascade engaged. Infiltration unsustainable. Ronan exhaled. He knew what that meant. The AI was losing control. He turned to Brig. "Evacuate the support fleet, now." "You're staying?" "I'm ending this." Brig didn't argue. He just saluted. Kova walked up to him as alarms screamed across the ship. "This isn't just about vengeance anymore, is it?" "No," he said. "It's about your son." "Yes." "And our future?" He looked at her, then nodded. She touched his arm. "Make it mean something." And left. He stood alone on the bridge as systems overloaded. Heat rose and gravity shivered. He keyed in the Omega Burn sequence. The screen flashed red. Arming Omega Burn, 180 seconds to detonation. Ronan opened a channel to Earth. Not to command, to the people. Across colonies, screens flickered, and his face appeared, sweat-soaked, blood-stained, resolute. "This is Commander Ronan," he said. "I may not make it back." He paused. "They tried to erase us. They called us monsters. And maybe we became what they feared." He looked down. "But we never stopped fighting." He looked back up, eyes burning. "We lived. We endured. We clawed our way through hell. And today, I stand on the edge of that hell again, not to beg, not to plead, but to promise you this." He took a breath. "Earth will survive, even if I don't." The message cut out. The singularity drive reached critical. Ronan stood in the center of the bridge as the walls bent inward, metal groaning, stars twisting into a spiral of light. He held his son's toy soldier in his hand, smiled, and whispered, "Let them remember." The Indomitable vanished in a pulse of gravity that erased the Ulari spire from existence. The galaxy shuddered. Thornvale was gone. The Accord was shattered. Earth survived. But Ronan was gone, or so the galaxy thought. He became a myth within hours of his death. The footage of the Indomitable's final burn, that singular flash of light as the Singularity payload consumed the Ulari Spire, replayed across every system, every colony, every backwater outpost that once forgot Earth existed. The war ended not with a treaty, not with signatures and handshakes, but with silence. Stunned, broken, terrified silence. The Accord collapsed within days. The remaining members, those still clinging to authority, found their fleets in disarray, their leaders in hiding, their people in open rebellion. Ulari worlds suffered internal mutinies. Varnath command structures imploded as soldiers refused to fire another shot. Dravari syndicates were hunted in the streets by their own clients. There were no speeches, no declarations, only retreat. Human space, once quarantined by fear and isolation, now stood untouched, not by diplomacy, not by alliance, by respect, earned in the only language the galaxy ever truly understood: sacrifice and strength. Kova was promoted to High Commander within a week, though she refused the title. She simply called herself Keeper of the Line, echoing something Ronan used to say when the siege first began. "We hold the line, no matter what's on the other side." Brigg led the reconstruction of Sol's outer defense network, not because he had to, but because he couldn't sleep if he didn't. He poured every waking hour into ensuring no other generation would face what his had. As for Dax Varen, he disappeared. Some say he died in the Spire. Others claim they saw him boarding a rogue ship headed for the Andari Shroud, a place where maps failed and ghosts ruled. No one ever confirmed it. But every time an Accord fugitive turned up dead with a coin on their chest, people whispered his name. And Ronan? He became more than a man. They built a statue where the Indomitable launched its final assault, a towering monument of forged titanium and scorched marble, shaped like a man standing with his back to Earth, facing the stars. One hand at his side, one holding a child's toy soldier. It became a pilgrimage site. Veterans, survivors, refugees from the siege. They all came, not to pray, to remember, and to promise that no species would ever cross into human space again. But behind the public myth, behind the flags and statues, there was another legacy. A file, encrypted, sealed by Kova herself, marked Ronan Last Directive. Inside was a message, pre-recorded, time-stamped 20 minutes before detonation. His face looked older than ever, tired, not broken, just spent. "If you're watching this, I'm gone," he said plainly. "And I need you to know, I didn't do this because I wanted to. I did it because no one else would." He looked away for a moment. "I don't know what comes next. Peace, war, something worse. But I know this. Earth can't forget what it's become." He leaned closer. Not just fighters, survivors, warriors, yes, but with a soul. Don't lose that. Don't become them. He paused. "They took everything from us. We gave them fire in return. But don't let fire be all we are. Let it be what we needed, not what we become forever." His eyes softened, and for a flicker of a second, the soldier disappeared, and the father returned. "Tell them. I tried." Then the message ended. Kova never released it publicly. She buried it in a secure node deep in Earth's central archive, locked behind her own genetic key. Maybe one day the world would be ready to see it, but not yet. For now, they needed Ronan the symbol, Ronan the wrath, Ronan the wall the galaxy broke itself against. Earth changed after that. It didn't become a conqueror. It didn't build an empire. It became a sentinel. Its borders were laced with detection grids, quantum mines, auto-response fleets. Any vessel breaching those lines received no warning, no negotiation, just a memory. No species enters human space. The phrase etched into orbital stations, taught in every colony school, repeated in every fleet's oath. And yet, inside that border, Earth healed. Slowly. The children rescued from the labs grew up, many under protection, some under silence. Some had scars too deep for medicine to touch. But most lived. One, the boy with the toy soldier, joined the fleet 20 years later. His first act as captain? Laying a wreath at the Ronin statue's base. Earth remembered. But Earth endured. Galactic politics tried to rebuild, of course. Fractured alliances whispered of reunification, new councils, new names. But no matter what banner they flew, they never touched Sol again. Because they all remembered what one human ship did. What one father, broken by grief, forged in loss, driven by vengeance, was willing to become. They remembered that Earth didn't die when they tried to kill it. It got angry, and the galaxy would never forget the cost of crossing the line. In the end, no one knew if Ronin had truly died. No body, no black box, no fragment of his DNA recovered. Some said he became part of the singularity, absorbed into the gravitational wound he unleashed. Others believed he lived somehow, that he escaped in one of the drop pods, that he wandered the edge of the galaxy in exile, watching, waiting. A few conspiracy channels even claimed he was the voice behind certain coded distress calls sent from the fringe systems where the last remnants of the Accord tried to regroup. But those were just stories. Until, one day, a child on an outer colony found a strange box buried beneath a tree, planted in memory of the siege. Inside was a toy soldier, scratched, old, still intact. Tied to it was a simple note. Keep holding the line. No name, no date, just a legacy that would never fade. The man who burned the stars to save a planet and made the galaxy remember. The end. They said space was for everyone, a shared inheritance among civilizations, peaceful, unified, enlightened. That was before the Terran exclusion zone lit up on every galactic star map like a red skull warning pirates away from cursed waters. And it wasn't a hollow threat. Any species, ship, or probe that crossed the invisible line never came back. No signals, no bodies. Just silence. I remember the first time I saw it. The map in the council chamber had it marked in blood-red arcs, pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat warning against trespass. I was a diplomatic attaché back then, serving under the Velkai emissary. They called it a human ghost zone, a scar on the map. But we knew better. The humans weren't dead. They were waiting. My name is Commander Bram Halden, former Earthborn fleet. Former because Earth doesn't have fleets anymore. We don't need them. Not after what happened in the year of the betrayal. See, it started like most tragedies do, in peace. The humans had just joined the Galactic Union, idealistic fools. We shared tech, culture, even blood. They gave their trust, and in return the other species gave them chains. It was slow at first. Trade deals that bled Earth dry, patents that enslaved Terran innovation, alien corporations mining the asteroid belt, leaving our own citizens jobless, treaties rewritten mid-negotiation, 1,000 tiny paper cuts until humanity bled dignity. But the final blow? The Treaty of Goran's Hollow. They called it a security measure. They said Earth's primitive aggression needed containment. What they really meant was they feared us. And fear makes cowards do ugly things. They took our colonies, declared Mars a neutral resource hub, then deployed VEC-class harvesters and left the settlements to rot. They dismantled our navy in the name of peace. And then, they came for the children. No one talks about Project Sanctum now, buried in classified archives. But I was there. I saw the abductions, the experiments, our children taken to rehabilitation centers for xenosympathetic conditioning. Indoctrination camps, really, designed to breed the human out of humans. We begged the council, pleaded for justice. But all we got was silence. The same kind of silence that now echoes from every ship that dares cross into Terran space. Then came the burn. The day Earth went dark. Entire planet cloaked under a blackout field. No communications, no signals, not even a distress beacon, just gone. And when the council sent a fleet to investigate, it vanished too. That was 10 years ago. I've lived long enough to hear the rumors, theories, lies. They say Earth turned savage, that humanity is extinct, that a virus wiped them out. But they're all wrong. I know the truth, because I've seen them. I escaped the council 6 years ago, fled with a stolen freighter, crossed into the exclusion zone knowing full well it could be suicide. But I had to know what happened. I had to see it for myself. I expected to find ruins, ash, maybe even those black flags the radicals used to wave. Instead, I found something far worse. I found order, discipline, evolution. The humans hadn't disappeared, they had prepared, and now they were watching. The moment I crossed the invisible line into Terran space, I expected death. A flash of light, a cold void. Maybe something worse. That's what they tell you outside the exclusion zone, that humans have automated defense grids designed to reduce anything to atoms before it finishes a sentence. But that didn't happen. Instead, nothing did. No alarms, no scans, no missiles, just eerie silence stretching across the stars. The only thing louder than that silence was the pounding in my chest. I piloted the freighter, a rusting heap I'd stolen from a Vossian scrapyard, slow and steady, holding my breath. My nav console flickered with warning lights, none of which meant a damn thing out here. Every system I relied on, galactic positioning, council beacon net, standard tracking, dropped dead the second I crossed the threshold. It was like entering another reality. What replaced them was different. There were frequencies in the background, faint but deliberate, not natural static. These were organized, patterned, almost like music, but it wasn't for me. It felt like I was being studied, not scanned, watched, judged. 2 hours in, I thought I'd made it. Thought the old stories were just that, stories, until something appeared outside my window. It didn't come on sensors, nothing lit up. It was just there, a ship. Human-made, no doubt. Black as void, built in angles that made your eyes ache to look at them too long. No running lights, no markings, just a sleek predator sitting quietly beside me like a shark, deciding if you were worth chewing. It didn't hail me. Didn't respond when I broadcast a standard greeting. It just followed. Every move I made, it mirrored with surgical precision. I accelerated. It matched. I dropped to sublight. It coasted beside me like we were dancing. No threats, no weapons, just quiet dominance. And then it vanished. Not with a jump. Not with a burn. It just blinked out. That's when I knew I wasn't dealing with the humans I remembered. These weren't diplomats and dreamers, not scientists or traders. These were ghosts wrapped in iron. Children raised by betrayal and built for vengeance. A few days later, I lost track of time inside the zone. I found Earth. Not the planet itself. Not yet. But a relay station, orbiting some no-name moon between the old Mars trade route and the Belt's edge. It looked abandoned. Scorched metal, shattered windows, debris floating like bones in water. I approached with caution. Docked manually. Systems resisted at first, But then something let me in, like it wanted me there. Inside, it was dark. Not the usual emergency darkness, but something colder, as if even light was afraid to stay too long. I walked through corridors filled with echoes. Rusted signs still bore the old Terran Alliance logos, forgotten emblems of a proud species once welcomed into the stars. Consoles were ripped apart, screens cracked, but something about the place felt alive, not in the physical sense, more like it was remembering me. Then came the voice. Male. Calm. Unmistakably human. You shouldn't have come. I froze, spun around. Nothing. The voice didn't come through my comms. It was in the room. I'm not here to harm, I said, raising my hands. I'm Bram Halden, former Earthborn. I know who you are. The air felt heavier. You were there during the evacuation of Europa Colony. You smuggled children off-world during the purge. I did what I could, I said, heart thudding. I thought everyone else was gone. I thought humanity was dead. There was a pause. Then the voice replied, lower, bitter. Humanity was dead. What you see now is something else. The lights snapped on, one by one, leading me down a corridor. I followed. What else could I do? The path led me to a chamber that looked like an old operations center. In the middle sat a chair, and in it a man. He looked almost normal. Pale skin, short black hair, worn jumpsuit. But his eyes weren't right. They were too steady, too cold, like he'd seen too much to ever blink again. You're lucky, he said. We usually shoot first. I'm not here to spy, I said. I left the council. I've seen what they did. I came looking for answers. And now you have them. Leave. No. That made him twitch. I stepped forward. I didn't cross half the galaxy to turn back empty. I know what they did to us. The treaties, the betrayals, the children. I lived it. But this silence, the ghost stories, it's not enough. They think you're gone. I want them to know you're not. He stood. Slowly. Why? Because I'm tired of their lies, I said. Because they made us weak, and we paid in blood. And because if anyone deserves fear, it's them. That finally cracked something in him. A small smile, cold and knowing. You're not the first to come here like that. Few of you leave. Fewer still survive. But maybe you're the kind who needs to see it for himself. He tapped a panel. A hidden door slid open. Bright light poured through. Welcome to Bastion, he said. The last city of Earth. What I saw on the other side shattered everything I thought I knew. Earth wasn't dead. It was reborn. Massive towers rose from scorched plains, machines unlike anything I'd seen, flying without thrusters, construction bots moving like insects across an artificial skyline. No civilians, just soldiers, engineers, builders, all moving with purpose. It was a fortress, a machine city, built for war. I was led through winding corridors beneath the city, deep underground where the old Earth governments once hid bunkers and research labs. Now repurposed into something new. They called it the Crucible. Here they trained the next generation, not with lectures or soft words, but with pain, drills, combat simulations. Children of war, bred not for peace, but survival. One room showed teens dissecting alien weapons. Another had augmented troops running zero-G combat drills. And in every corner, old human war banners hung beside the symbol of a black gauntlet crushing a council sigil. What is this? I asked. The man who guided me didn't answer right away. He just looked over the expanse and said, Insurance. We're coming back, he added after a pause. Not to negotiate, not to beg. We've had our time in chains. Now it's their turn to learn what fear tastes like. But why wait? He glanced at me with a hard stare. Because we're not done evolving. And because the longer they think we're ghosts, the louder they scream when we finally return. He showed me one last thing before I left. A chamber beneath the crucible, containing a sphere, pulsing with raw energy. I didn't know what it was, but I knew enough to be afraid. "That's not a bomb," he said. "It's worse." "What is it?" "Our voice," he replied. "When the time comes, it speaks first." As I boarded my ship to leave, I realized something horrifying. The Council hadn't just created enemies when they betrayed Earth. They had forged predators. And soon, every species that watched humans burn without lifting a hand would understand exactly why no one enters human space anymore. Because next time, we won't wait for them to come to us. I left Bastion with more than just answers. I left with a curse. Something about that place had imprinted itself on me. Maybe it was the silence, the unnatural order, or the eyes of those young recruits, burning not with hope, but with cold, trained fury. Whatever it was, it followed me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that black gauntlet crushing the symbol of the Galactic Council. Not as propaganda, but as prophecy. The journey back to the edge of Terran space was a blur. My freighter moved on auto, but my mind stayed buried in what I'd seen. Earth hadn't just survived the betrayal, it had weaponized it. And what scared me most wasn't their technology, it was their patience. The Council had stripped them of allies, identity, even freedom. But instead of collapsing, humanity had distilled every ounce of that pain into something focused. Something that no alien species, not even the advanced ones like the Voss or the Ureth, had ever developed. Resentment born from moral clarity. I made contact with an old comrade once I crossed back into the neutral corridor, Soren Drek, a half-retired mercenary who owed me for saving his neck during the Vakari riots. He met me in a rundown orbital station called Shell 7, just outside Goran's reach. I thought he'd changed. He hadn't. The first thing he did when I docked was draw a weapon on me. "I thought you were dead," he growled. "Or worse, converted." "Nice to see you too," I said, not even flinching. "Put the gun down, Drek." "I've seen worse things than you lately." He narrowed his eyes. "You went in, didn't you?" I nodded. Slowly. He exhaled and finally holstered the weapon. "Then you're dumber than you look. They're not gone, Soren. They're waiting. And what they've built, it's beyond anything we imagined." He sat, poured 2 glasses of some chemical excuse for whiskey, and stared at me in silence. "I always said the Council would regret what they did to Earth," he muttered, "but I figured we had time." "We don't." I slid him a data shard, encrypted, fragmented, but it held enough. Images of Bastion, the Crucible, that weaponized sphere they called the Voice. He scanned it, jaw tightening. "You know what this means, right? If the Council finds out you brought this back..." "They won't. Not yet." "Not yet?" he snapped. "You planning on telling them?" "I plan on choosing who deserves the warning." He laughed bitterly. "Still a bleeding idealist, Bram? Even after everything?" "Number, I'm something worse now." "I understand." We spent the next 2 days hiding in that orbiting dump, decrypting more of the data I'd brought. Some of it was fragmented AI code. Other parts were doctrine, training logs, psychological conditioning programs, defense stratagems that made even Soren, a man who had seen war since childhood, shake his head in disbelief. "They've turned war into a language," he said, "and they're fluent." But the shard held something else. A list, not of enemies, of traitors, names, species, individuals, some in the Council, some in high corporate orbitals, others living quietly in exile, thinking their hands were clean. They weren't. "You know what this is?" I asked Soren. "A death list," he said flatly. I nodded. "And I think they're starting to check names off." He stared at me, then leaned in close. "You want to warn them?" "No," I said. I want to use them. You're insane. Maybe. But you and I both know the Council won't listen until their towers start crumbling. So we use their own fear. We leak just enough. Show them ghosts are real. Force them into panic. And in the chaos, we choose who burns. Soren grinned. Now that's the Bram I remember. It didn't take long to get the first reaction. 2 weeks after the shard leak, a Urith diplomat was found murdered in her own compound. Not just killed, displayed, stripped, skinned, hung above her own species' flag with the words, "You watched them suffer," carved into her chest. The Council called it terrorism, said the humans were acting from the shadows. But I knew better. It wasn't a message, it was a receipt. More followed. A Vossian warlord mysteriously died aboard his command vessel. No breach, no poison. Just dead. Every organ ruptured from within like his body imploded. A message was scrawled into the bulkhead with his own blood. This is justice. Soon, rumors spread faster than facts. Stations abandoned. Freighters reported sightings of human ships with no registration, no comms, just silent shadows in space. Some were never seen again. Panic gripped the outer systems. The Council convened an emergency summit. I wasn't invited, obviously, but I was watching. From a hidden orbital relay, I intercepted chatter. They were cracking, accusing each other, falling back into the same tribal paranoia that had made them betray Earth in the first place. It was working, but that wasn't the part that shook me. It was when one of the Council aides whispered something during a private comm, something that wasn't meant for the record. "We made a mistake," she said. "We thought we were taming beasts, but we were burying gods." And I knew then, it wasn't just revenge that Bastion wanted. It was a reckoning, a reshaping of the galactic order, and they wouldn't stop until every lie, every chain, every smug alien empire that once looked down on Earth had been reduced to dust. I asked Soren one night, over a bitter drink, "You think they'll win?" He took a long drag of a vapor stick and said, "They already have." Why? Because fear isn't about strength. It's about belief. And right now, every species out there believes humans are monsters, silent, calculating, and ready to unleash hell. And what if they're wrong? He smiled grimly. Then they'll die afraid anyway. I left Shell 7 with a new mission. Not to warn, not to save, but to watch. To move between the cracks, follow the list, and see just how far humanity was willing to go. I'd once thought betrayal had broken us, but now I saw it clearly. Betrayal hadn't broken humanity, it had purified it. The list didn't lie. 3 names down, 22 left. And the silence between each strike was worse than the act itself. That was the genius of Bastion's strategy. They didn't broadcast, didn't gloat. No war declarations or peace ultimatums, just quiet execution. Surgical, untraceable. Each move designed to make the next one inevitable. The galaxy wasn't at war yet, but the war had already begun. I found the 4th name in the dirty back alleys of Chira's Drift, a commerce moon built like a hive, all stacked slums and black market tech vendors, stinking of grease, neon smoke, and the desperate sweat of 10,000 species trading sins. His name was Karnos Yev, Ureth, once a senior logistics officer during the Trade Suppression Accords. Back then, he signed the order that rerouted vital Terran food supplies to friendlier colonies. Earth lost 7 million to starvation that year. Quiet genocide under the name of economic correction. Now he ran a security firm. Fat, comfortable, untouchable. At least that's what he thought. I tracked him for 2 days, watched his routines. He traveled light with 2 personal guards, both cyber-modded and smug, probably ex-military turned corporate muscle. They were good, but not Bastion good. I knew I wasn't the one meant to kill him. I wasn't part of Bastion's elite. I was just an old soldier carrying ghosts. But someone was here. I could feel it, smell it in the air, like the moment before a storm hits metal. It happened on the third night. Karnos was drinking in some velvet-lit lounge, draped in synthetic females, and puffing on imported vapor leaves like a man who thought the past had forgotten him. That's when the lights cut. Not all at once. Just his booth. And then the sound. A scream. But not his. One of the girls slumped forward, blood leaking from her ears. Dead. The second tried to run. Didn't make it 2 steps before collapsing like a puppet with its strings sliced. The guards rose, weapons drawn, but there was no target. No gunfire, just death. Karnos stood, trembling. "Who's there?" he barked. "Who dares?" A whisper came from behind him. No one saw who said it. "You watched them starve." He turned, but there was no one. Then his body convulsed. Hard, violent, like something inside him wanted out. He dropped to his knees, coughing, retching, before vomiting black blood onto the white marble floor. The crowd screamed. Someone called security, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. Not just dead, emptied, eyes hollow, tongue missing, and in its place, carved into his chest with precision, "Your hunger fed our fire." They left the body untouched, because everyone knew now what it meant. Another name off the list. I left the drift immediately. My face was too known. The whispers had started again. "The humans are back. They're killing us one by one." It wasn't fear anymore. It was acceptance. Whole sectors began withdrawing from council control. Trade halted. Ambassadors were recalled. Non-human species who'd once lorded over Terrans now treated human-shaped shadows as death incarnate. Every flicker of movement became a threat. Every human vessel, no matter how old or broken, was seen as a warship in disguise. I traveled next to the Halmar Fringe, a cluster of forgotten mining worlds run by corporate slavers. That's where I found another ghost. She didn't give a name, just an alias. Wraith. She was Bastion-born, trained in the Crucible, and unlike anything I'd ever seen. Not modified, not robotic, perfected. She moved like a thought, soundless, invisible. Watched me for hours before speaking. Her first words chilled my blood. "You followed the list. I didn't deny it. I needed to see. Now you've seen. Why tell me anything? Because your voice still carries, because you remember pain. And you want me to spread fear?" She tilted her head, something almost human in the gesture. "Fear spreads itself. You're just the wind that fans the fire." I asked her about the plan, about the end game. She didn't flinch. "There's no end. There's only balance. We remove what tipped the scales, and when the ashes settle, they'll rebuild in our image. Vengeance isn't justice." "No," she said quietly. "It's better." I should have been afraid of her. Maybe I was. But more than that, I was convinced. Not because she spoke like a zealot, but because everything she said had already been proven. Every corpse on that list, every scream from the council chambers, was evidence. I remembered Earth the way it used to be. Loud, wild, fractured. We weren't perfect. We bled each other more than we bled others. But at least we bled honestly. Now, we didn't bleed at all. We made others do it for us. The fifth name died days later. He was no one special. A bureaucrat, a paper pusher. But he'd once signed off on a prison satellite where Terran protesters were experimented on with psychic dampening tech. Rumors said some of them still screamed in the void. He was found floating outside his station. No breach, no suit, just floating. naked, frozen, and grinning. No one ever found the breach in his station's hull, because there wasn't one. That was the pattern now. Impossibility, killings that defied explanation, murder as message, as performance, as warning. The council stopped pretending. They issued an emergency decree. All humans currently outside the exclusion zone were to be detained or expelled. Some fought back. Some disappeared before the order could reach them. I knew this would only feed the fire. Bastion didn't need more enemies. It just needed the illusion that everyone was already guilty. And guilt was a heavy thing in this galaxy. By the time we hit name 7, I started feeling it myself. Not guilt, not shame, purpose. I'd spent years drifting, trying to forget the war, trying to find some place where the betrayal didn't burn every time I blinked. But now I had a direction again, a storm to ride. And I was done waiting. I reached out to Wraith again. This time I had a name for her, a target, one not on the official Bastion list, but someone who'd slipped through the cracks. A name I remembered too well. Admiral Vern Ekris. He'd been the one who ordered my squad into the ice fields of Europa without backup. Said it was low priority. Half my men died freezing. The rest bled out after we were ambushed. No medals, no funerals, just forgotten graves buried beneath corporate reports. She didn't hesitate. Where? Gavros Prime, retired, living in luxury. Then he dies slow. I didn't ask what she meant. I just watched as she walked into the shadows and felt the galaxy grow one shade darker. I didn't sleep the night before it happened. Not because of guilt. That died the day Earth went dark. It was something else, something colder, a pulse under my skin. Like I could feel it coming. Like the galaxy itself held its breath, waiting for the next act of judgment. Admiral Vern Ekris wasn't just a name on a file. He was my ghost. 2 decades ago, he stood in front of a council hearing and justified sending my entire squad into the Europa sinkhole without support. Tactical containment, he called it. Expendable assets with a low probability of strategic success. We were Terran Marines, the last loyal unit before the disarmament. And to him, we were paperwork. The few of us who survived that frozen hell were scattered, discharged, forgotten. I carried the scars in my bones. I still limped in the rain, still coughed blood on cold mornings. He retired with honors, built a mansion on Gavros Prime, lived surrounded by exotic servants, antique war medals, and the smug security of being part of the winning side. Wraith called it Cleansing Day. She said Bastion had been watching Ekris for months, waiting. You gave us the location, she told me. So this one is yours to witness. She didn't offer me a weapon. She didn't have to. This wasn't my kill, it was his sentence. We touched down on Gavros Prime under forged diplomatic codes. The planet's skies were sterile blue, its cities lined with polished marble and fountains that sang lullabies in 5 languages. A haven for the old elite, the war profiteers, the architects of betrayal. They built paradise from the bones of the conquered. His estate stood on a cliffside like a crown, watched over by automated drones and private security. I expected trouble, resistance. I got silence. Wraith walked ahead of me, cloaked in shadows, unarmed, but more dangerous than an entire armory. Her eyes scanned everything but settled on nothing. She was already inside the kill. We entered through the main gate. No alarms, no response. The guards didn't move, because they were already dead. One sat slumped over a console, eyes glassed, lips parted mid-sentence. The other lay against the wall, expression frozen in surprise. No blood, no sign of struggle. They never saw it coming, she said. We moved through the estate like ghosts. The walls were covered in paintings, abstract pieces from a dozen cultures Ekris helped pillage. A Ureth sunstorm canvas, a Vicari flame sculpture, even an old Terran oil painting, probably stolen during the lootings. The irony made me sick. Wraith found him in his study. Alive. For now. He was seated in a recliner, watching old footage on a projection wall. His own speeches, war medals, younger versions of himself shaking hands with council delegates and smiling through thin lies. He didn't look surprised to see us. "I was wondering when they'd come," he said softly, without turning. Wraith didn't speak. She just circled behind him, standing like a silent reaper in human form. I stepped forward. "Vern Ekris," he smiled, still facing the screen. "Bram Halden. You were one of mine, weren't you? Europa, yes? I watched men die in -50 storms because you needed a distraction on another front," I said. "You fed us to ghosts." He nodded. "Yes, I did." He didn't flinch, didn't beg. "You think your honesty buys you mercy?" I asked. "No," he said. "But perhaps understanding." That made me laugh, not because it was funny, but because the man actually believed it. "I understood the second I walked into Bastion," I said. "I understood what you and the Council created." He turned slowly, eyes meeting mine. They were old, clouded, but not afraid. "I gave you clarity," he said. "Purpose. Before the betrayal, humans were soft, fragmented, petty. It was our betrayal that made you this. You should thank me." Wraith stepped forward, and I finally saw her face in full light. Young, barely 30, but her eyes were ancient, eyes that had seen death and found purpose in it. She knelt beside Ekris, reached into a satchel and pulled out a small device. A sphere, metallic, glowing faintly blue. His breath hitched. "You know what this is?" she asked. He nodded. "Neural stinger." "No," she said coldly. "It's history. Yours." She pressed it to his temple. The device activated instantly. Lights flared. His body stiffened. And then he began to speak. Not words, confessions, every order, every decision, every lie. The device was ripping the memories from him, forcing him to relive them aloud. He screamed, not in pain, but in despair, because he was remembering who he really was. He cried out names, places, projects long buried. At one point he begged someone named Marek to stop, probably a subordinate who died decades ago. He sobbed, and then he went quiet. Dead. Wraith removed the device and stood. "Why?" I asked. "Because the galaxy needs receipts," she said, "not just bodies." We left the estate untouched. By morning, the confession had already leaked. Bastion's networks were precise. Select council members woke to the full file in their private comms. Some denied it. Others went silent. A few tried to run. None succeeded. Gavros Prime went into lockdown, claiming an unknown terrorist cell had struck. The media called it an isolated incident. But no one believed it. Not anymore. The body count was too specific. The messages too pointed. Everyone with blood on their hands began sleeping with one eye open. And that's when the Council made its first public mistake. They retaliated, a joint strike on a human freighter that had crossed into neutral space. 5 Terrans dead, all civilians, claimed to be insurgents. The next day, the Gavari embassy on Joran Prime exploded, leveled in one blast. No trace of the attacker, no message this time. None was needed. The war had officially begun, not with fleets or invasions, but with a whisper that bled into a scream. And the galaxy finally understood. No species enters human space. Not because we won't let them, but because they might not come back whole. Or worse, come back knowing what they truly did. War doesn't begin with a bang. Not anymore. It starts with hesitation. Missed calls. Nervous glances during council meetings. a fleet that doesn't respond to a distress signal, a senator who suddenly falls silent in the middle of a speech when the lights flicker. Because now everyone watches the shadows, not the stars. I watched from the edges. The kill list was more than half complete now. 12 names silenced, half a dozen more vanished, runaways who knew they were next but had nowhere left to run. Their wealth couldn't shield them. Their titles meant nothing. Bastion wasn't hunting status. It was delivering balance. But something changed after Gavros Prime. The killing wasn't silent anymore. Wraith called it the turn. "It's not just punishment now," she said. "It's pressure." I didn't ask what she meant. I saw it for myself. The Urith system collapsed in a single day, not from fire, but from fracture. 3 of their key planets seceded from council governance. Broadcasts flared up showing past war crimes committed against humans. Entire towns declared themselves neutral or sympathetic to Bastion. Riots broke out. Alien cities torn apart by their own citizens, students, workers, even military defectors who demanded answers, demanded justice, demanded truth. The council called it human manipulation. But the people knew better. The lies had festered too long. By the time the 14th name on the list was struck down, some former diplomat whose role in the Terran child reconditioning camps had been minimized in public statements, the cracks became canyons. I was on a transport hub called Sigma Verge when the real break happened. A council fleet, Ureth and Vossian combined, pulled into orbit, officially for inspection, unofficially to root out sympathizers and seize any Terran cargo. They underestimated how many sympathizers there were. It started with whispers. Then someone shot a soldier, then another, then the power grid failed. And when it came back up, half the station was gone. Literally, torn apart by internal sabotage. Vents flushed soldiers into the void. Drones were reprogrammed. Explosives had been planted weeks earlier, strategically, precisely, methodically. The entire left side of the station collapsed into the planet's gravity well, over 12,000 dead. And a single message, painted in thick red across the surviving command center. "You do not get to forget us." I got out only because I wasn't supposed to die there. Bastion had agents on the station, hidden in the crowd, moving like ghosts. One of them pulled me into a service shaft minutes before the breach. I never saw their face. They just said one thing: "You're still useful." Then they were gone. After that, the galaxy began to devour itself. Trade routes shut down. Council alliances fractured. Trust became poison. Everyone was either a target or a traitor. Even species that had stayed neutral began choosing sides, not because they believed in Bastion, but because they feared being on the list next, because guilt echoes in cowards, and the stars were full of cowards. The Council, desperate to regain control, pulled its fleets from outer colonies. Every major world became a fortress. Curfews, surveillance, dissent criminalized. It backfired. When the people you've oppressed for decades finally see fear in your eyes, they don't run. They rise. Entire populations declared support for the Terran cause. Not because they loved humans, but because the enemy of their enemy had become something righteous, something unkillable. That was the brilliance of it all. Bastion didn't need to win battles. They made fear do the fighting. I returned to Shell 7 briefly. Found Soren drunk and laughing at a cracked screen broadcasting council propaganda. Something about resisting the Terran uprising. He poured me a glass. "They're late to the funeral," he said, slurring. "This war was over the day Earth went dark." They still think they can control the narrative. Let them. Their words are hollow. It's not about stories now. It's about memories. He was right, because everywhere I went, I saw the same thing. Memories waking up. Old Terran sympathizers crawling out of hiding. Children of refugees forming quiet networks. Non-humans who'd lived among Terrans, who'd loved, laughed, bled beside them, beginning to speak. They told their stories about the purges, the mining camps, the forced sterilization experiments, the education centers that rewrote human history to make Earth a villain. And suddenly, the galaxy was listening, because no amount of council broadcasts could stop the truth from bleeding through. That was Bastion's real weapon, not ships, not guns, remembrance. I got a message from Wraith soon after Sigma Verge fell. One word. Soon. I didn't need to ask what it meant. The final phase was beginning. I traveled to a neutral moon called Harrow's Fall. Remote, cold, quiet. It was where the Council once held Terran defectors in black site interrogation. That site was dust now, but the memories still lingered. Bastion had turned it into a meeting ground. There were 5 of us, all ex-military, all Terran-born, all forgotten. Wraith arrived last. She laid out the plan. They weren't going to invade the Council. They were going to expose it. A single coordinated strike on a broadcast network that reached over 60 systems. Not to kill, not to threaten, but to show the universe exactly what the Council had done. Records, footage, eyewitness accounts, proof. Everything they buried, every crime they committed against Earth, and they wouldn't be able to bury it again. I looked around at the others. Tired faces, hardened eyes. None of us were heroes. We were just done pretending the galaxy was good. We're not trying to make them love us, Wraith said. We're making sure they never forget us again. I nodded, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was part of something real. The plan would go into motion in 2 weeks. I left Harrow's Fall knowing the final storm was coming. Not a war to win land or glory, but a reckoning. One built not on conquest, but on truth sharpened like a blade. And when it fell, no species, no government, no empire would ever dare enter human space again. Because now they understood. We weren't victims. We weren't survivors. We were the reckoning they'd begged the stars to forget. There was no launch countdown, no trumpets, no battle fleets carving through the stars. It began with a flicker, a moment, one too short to notice unless you were watching closely. Every major broadcast channel, council-controlled or otherwise, flickered at precisely 2:07 Standard Galactic Time. Just a single, silent second of static. Then it returned to normal programming. Political debates, market indices, cultural shows. Most viewers dismissed it. Until it happened again. Exactly 27 minutes later. And then again. And this time, the static stayed. Every screen across the galaxy went dark. And when the signal returned, there was no anchor, no studio, no music. Just a face. Old. Weathered. Human. It was mine. My voice was steady. My name is Bram Halden, former soldier, former servant of the Galactic Council, a man who once believed in peace, until I saw what peace cost my people. I had recorded it 3 days earlier on Harrow's Fall. My face was chosen not because I was important, but because I was familiar. A Terran relic, a symbol of the forgotten. Behind me, the video shifted. It showed archives, real, unedited, untouched. Footage of Earth's dismantling, orbiting freighters full of stolen Terran resources, children pulled from homes, entire cities bombed for pacification. Interrogation chambers, genetic experimentation, starvation reports signed by smiling diplomats. The galaxy watched in silence. Because they couldn't look away. My voice guided them through each crime. This is what the Council built. Not unity, not peace, control. And they feared what they couldn't control. a species that would not kneel, so they tried to erase us. Another shift. This time, the camps. Footage of Terran prisoners, malnourished, beaten, experimented on. Silent rows of women forced into sterilization wards. Boys turned into controlled drones by neurosplicing implants. Testimony from survivors, non-human doctors who defected and confessed. They called us volatile, dangerous, but the truth was simpler. They envied us. They feared what would happen if we stood equal. The broadcast lasted 27 minutes. It ended with one final message. White text over black. No species enters human space, because now they remember why they shouldn't. Silence followed. Not because the signal cut, but because the galaxy didn't know how to respond. I sat alone, deep inside a Bastion relay bunker, listening to the aftermath echo across 1,000 channels. Some denied it, others screamed for proof, but the smartest ones stayed quiet, because the smart ones knew it was real. Council HQ went into full lockdown, emergency summits, threats of cyber warfare, accusations of deepfake propaganda, but none of it mattered, because the people had seen the truth. Riots broke out in 7 major council-aligned systems within hours. Police stations burned. Military barracks were bombed from within by their own soldiers. On Chathar 9, a group of alien students occupied their planetary governor's estate and broadcast their own confessions, how they'd supported the council, how they'd stayed silent when Terran children disappeared. Across neutral worlds, Bastion banners began appearing. Not flown, etched, quiet, permanent, as if someone had taken a blade to metal and carved the message into the planet itself. I received one final message from Wraith. A data packet. Untraceable. Encrypted. In it, a list of planets where the Council had begun mobilizing for a counterstrike. A preemptive assault. They weren't going to wait for Bastion to strike again. They were going to strike first. Her message was simple. Let them. Now the people know. Let them show the galaxy who they really are. It was genius. Because Bastion didn't need to win a war of weapons. It had already won the war of memory. And the moment the Council's fleets opened fire on systems now sympathetic to the Terran cause, the rest of the galaxy would turn. The final death blow wouldn't come from humans. It would come from everyone else. I walked outside the relay bunker that night. The stars above were the same ones I grew up under, cold, distant, watching. But they didn't feel distant anymore. They felt ours. We had made them watch, made them remember, and now they were afraid, not of ships, not of guns, of truth, because the galaxy finally understood. You don't erase a people and expect silence. You don't build empires on bones and expect loyalty, and you don't betray humanity without consequences. The next part wasn't ours to write. The seeds were planted, the fire was lit. And for once, we weren't the ones burning. The Council opened fire. They struck the first worlds named in Wraith's data. Military dropships rained down on refineries, communication arrays shattered, fleets engaged. They bombed villages labeled sympathizers. They seized key planets. But the damage had already been done. For the first time, they were the aggressor, painted in their own crimes. Every system that flashed its coordinates in the data packet flipped overnight. Thousands rose up, uncloaking their allegiance to Bastion, identifying themselves not as human allies, but as human. Civilians, soldiers, even council officials turned their weapons against the strike forces. They captured bases. They exposed more evidence. They broadcast live testimonies, hacked council channels with photos of human refugees now welcomed, healed, reclothed. The narrative shifted again. And just like that, the council became the guilty ones. Worlds declared independence. Regional alliances fractured, Economies collapsed and reformed around human-neutral or pro-human coalitions. And for the first time in a century, Earth wasn't alone. They called it the Reckoning. And it wasn't a military campaign so much as a moral uprising, fueled by truth and vindicated by justice. In orbit above reformed Ureth Prime, I watched the Council flagship retreat. I was on a Bastion cruiser, sleek, black, silent. I stood by Wraith at the observation port. She gave no speech, no flourish. She didn't need to. The retreating fleet below said everything. They burned their own flags, literally. Ship crews threw Council banners into space. Some starved them into covenants of neutrality. Some pledged allegiance to Bastion. They all did the same thing. They acknowledged who the galaxy now served. I asked Wraith quietly, "What now?" She turned to me, face hard and eyes sharper. "Now we rebuild," she said, "not to dominate, but to lead, to show a different path." I pictured the crucible underground, the sphere, the voice they never used. Not for bombs, not for domination. It was something else entirely, a weapon of revelation, to be used to force truth on those still willing to lie. I asked her about it. She just nodded and said, "We'll need it." Because after the reckoning comes accountability. Some of the human-born will lead, others will stand trial, the technology industry will shift, security protocols rewrite, interspecies treaties will be drafted in fire. The galaxy isn't peaceful again. Not yet. But it's honest. The final act occurred on the Council grounds, the Grand Hall once used for peace debates, now cracked, scarred by protests and marked by human banners. I walked in with Bastion's truth delegation. Dozens strong, humans, Ureth, Voss, Gaveri defectors. They carried dossiers, memos, footage discs, legal documents, signed affidavits from survivors. The Council sat across from us. Empty seats told the story. Many leaders were gone. Some fled, others mortally wounded by public outcry. I stepped forward. I don't think I introduced myself, because no one needed me to. The world already knew my face. The world already knew my stories. I laid down the charges, on paper and holoshow: starvation, genetic experimentation, mass silencing, forced disarmament, assault on planetary sovereignty. Each item was a line in the ledger of cosmic crimes. The Council listened. They looked tired, broken, afraid. When I was done, I said, "You stripped humanity of its life, its agency, its rights. Now it's time to give them back what you stole." Then everything stopped. The hall echoed. Votes were cast. Silence fell. Then, verdicts. Guilty on every count. Truth imposed itself across the room. The Council meted out penalties. Seed fleets to neutral coalitions, universal reparations, creation of a galactic tribunal to oversee reconstruction. Key Council members stripped of power. Some sentenced to exile. Others, retirement. I stood among Bastion leaders as the sentence was read. No cheering, no fireworks, just quiet. A silence full of weight, then motion. Several former Council officials, tears, relief, shame, walked forward to sign the treaty. A human delegate, young, female, wounded in one of the rescue missions, stepped up. She looked at the assembly and said, "We didn't survive so we could rule. We survived so we could live. We survived so we could remember." No speech needed after that. The hall nodded and gave her the pen. The world shifted again in that moment, not led by vengeance but guided by remembrance. I used to think victory would feel like triumph, like fireworks over the ruins of our enemies, like justice carved into the bones of those who betrayed us. But standing here now, staring down at Earth from a tribunal observatory deck, I realize victory doesn't feel like anything. It just feels quiet. No more broadcasts, no alarms, no military sirens howling through dark corridors. Just silence. Not the silence of fear, the kind that haunted the Terran colonies after the Council betrayed us, but the silence of settling dust. I walk the halls of the tribunal as an advisor now. Bram Holden, former soldier, former fugitive, former ghost, now a name inked on 100 testimonies, a witness. I was never meant to survive this long. Most of the men from my unit didn't. Those who did scattered to forgotten corners of the galaxy, trying to drown their rage in drink, in shadow, in exile. But fate, if it exists, had other plans for me. So I stayed. Not for glory, not for revenge. To remember. The tribunal is vast, bigger than anything humanity ever built before the collapse, constructed with stone and metal from every system that took part in the reckoning, a symbol of unity, of truth, but also of scars. You can still see them. The jagged edges on the eastern tower where Gavari engineers refused to smooth the metal as a reminder of their people's silence. The black ink murals painted by Urith artists, depicting the burning of Terran archives, overlaid with the faces of those lost. Even the walkways are uneven, not due to error, but by design. So no one walks in comfort here. No one forgets. I attend the monthly sessions, listen to the new nations argue over currency standards and trade routes. It's mundane, tedious, but it's peace, real peace, the kind you build from ashes, the kind that costs something. Not every species was ready for what Bastion did. Some still call us monsters, assassins, manipulators, and they're not entirely wrong. The truth broadcast broke more than the Council. It fractured entire civilizations. Families turned against each other. Cultures collapsed under the weight of what they had enabled. But those wounds are healing, slowly, painfully, and this time, openly. There are no more secrets now. Wraith disappeared 3 months after the tribunal's formation, left no trace. Some say she died. Others say she returned to the Crucible, training the next generation of Terran defenders, not warriors, but historians. She was never meant to lead the future. Her job was to end the past. And she did. Soran, my old friend, my drinking partner, my devil on the shoulder, opened a bar on a free planet called Halver's Reach. It's called the Ember's Wake. He serves soldiers, traders, diplomats, sometimes council washouts too. He keeps a blaster under the counter, and a bastion patch over the register. I've gone to visit him twice. We don't talk much about the war, but sometimes, when it's late and the bar is empty, he pours us both a drink and says, "We didn't win, you know." I nod, because he's right. We just survived louder than they expected. Back on Earth, things are slower. Cities are rebuilt, not in steel but in care. Gardens where there used to be factories. Schools where there used to be bunkers. Children laugh again in the open. But the scars remain. Craters, walls with blast marks, empty shells of museums once bombed by council drones during the cultural purges. No one touches them. They stand like old friends at the edge of civilization. Quiet. Watching. Reminding. Earth isn't angry anymore. It's awake. Sometimes during the long nights, I take a walk along the old Atlantic ruins, what's left of the coastline that was drowned after the orbital bombardments. I walk alone. Not because I'm lonely, but because some memories demand solitude. The stars are clearer now. The orbital shields that once blacked out the night sky, Council tech used to track and suppress human signals, are gone. Torn down. Dismantled. And recycled into the tribunal's foundation beams. Some call it poetic. I call it necessary. Let them walk on the metal they once used to silence us. Let their children learn truth by standing on the bones of lies. The new generation. They're different. They ask why before they ask how. They read old Terran history. They question it. They don't salute the flags we died for. They plant new ones, smaller, gentler, wrapped in hope rather than fury. They don't want another Bastion. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe Bastion was a blade meant to be sheathed once the blood was drained. Not forgotten. Just put away. There are rumors, always rumors, that some rogue Terran cells still operate in the outer fringe. Fanatics. People who believe the reckoning didn't go far enough. That every non-human species should be punished for standing by while Earth burned. I don't agree with them, but I understand them, and I watch them. Closely. Because the truth is we're not above repeating history. No one is. That's why the tribunal exists. That's why we remember. Because once you forget, the cycle begins again. This morning I received a message, encrypted. No sender tag. I knew the style. Wraith, just 4 words. You did it, Bram. I sat with that message for hours, stared at it, read it again and again, and I realized something. I never wanted to win. I just wanted to end it. The fear, the silence, the feeling that humanity had become a warning sign instead of a civilization. And maybe now, we're something better. Not a warning, but a reminder that you can't silence a species, that you can't rewrite truth with policy, that when you push a people into darkness, sometimes they don't die. Sometimes they become the fire. Final entry. My name is Bram Halden. I fought in the Europa campaigns. I watched Earth fall. I walked through the ashes of Mars and stood on the ruins of Council arrogance. I saw vengeance. I saw justice. And I saw what comes after both. If you're reading this, remember one thing. The stars are not kind. But neither are they cruel. They're just watching, and they remember. Just like us. Forever.